Hi, everyone. Doc T here with another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. I so appreciate all of you who take the time to listen and learn to help horses thrive in the human world. This podcast is going to be based on what I hear from people out there, whether I'm at a barn or somebody visits the Horses Advocate group on Facebook, and they start asking the same questions over and over again. Or maybe they've never seen this and somehow you stumbled across this podcast and you want to help your horse thrive in the human world. Well, the first thing I want you to look at is the horse's top line. And that's what this podcast is all about. I'm going to be using a little bit of technology here where I can turn my iPad that I'm recording this on into a whiteboard, and I want to start drawing. So if you're just listening to this, it would be really worth it if you could watch the YouTube video of it, because there's some visuals here that'll help you understand what the top line is, what the backbone is, and why we're seeing so many problems in our horses. So let's start off. Before I go over there and start drawing, I want you to understand that from my perspective, as a veterinarian who's been working on horses for so long, I'm starting to see the same problems come up. And in a horse, one of the most identifying features of a problem going on is a loss of the top line muscle. This is something that's evident no matter what sport you're in, or what breed you tend to go towards. Even the mixed grades, these horses are all affected by what I call chronic protein deficiency. I've been preaching this for a long time. It's been in our podcast. Podcast number 27 goes over what proteins are. So if you aren't sure what a protein is, you need to be listening to that. You need to be listening to all the podcasts that talk about nutrition and how important proteins are. We know that one of the most important part of proteins is to build our connective tissue. And if we're having horses become an athlete, whether it's racing around a barrel or jumping over a fence or running as fast as you can from point A to point B, with or without pulling a cart or having a rider on your back, it's irrelevant what sport we're talking about. It is inclusive of all sports, that the top line has to be strong to propel this horse. In fact, every bit of their muscles and connective tissues, which includes the tendons, the ligaments, like the deep digital flexor, the suspensory ligaments, the joint capsules, the joint fluid, they all have to be in prime shape to support the activity that the horse is going through. Even if you're just a trail riding horse lover who just on occasion goes out on the weekends and enjoys the scenery, packing the camera, just being part of nature, and you're not an athlete, the horse is still carrying your weight around. And I challenge you to put on a backpack that's a quarter of your weight. Let's say you weigh 200 pounds, so you put 50 pounds on your back and carry that around for a while and see how you feel if you're not used to it. You have to acclimate the muscles and connective tissues so that you aren't sore and that you can do this time and time and time again. That's what training is all about. Conditioning is all about getting the muscles and ligaments and tendons to create what they've got. There's an example in my head that I use a lot. It's about having just envisioning in your mind a big 18-wheeler flatbed rolling up to your barn. And on this flatbed, it has all the lumber you need to build a brand new barn. Now, behind that semi is a busload of workers, and they all have hammers in their hands and saws, and they're ready to go to build this new barn. And you're going to be quite excited because the materials that are on that truck are basically the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones of your horse. And the workers with their hammers are representing the exercise program that you've elected to do for your horse, whether it's running or jumping or building muscle for an endurance event. You are all set until you find out that nobody brought any nails. And so you can't put the wood together. And that's what protein is. That's the missing ingredient. So many of these plans, almost everyone I ask, how do you build a top line? They immediately go to exercise. They say, well, you need to build it with hill work, lots of work, whatever. And I said, well, what about the materials needed? What if you're not having all the amino acids needed to build these muscles? And I get this look of, not understanding that concept, followed by a look of, oh, that's right, you do need to feed. Well, ask any bodybuilder, anybody who is in the bodybuilding business in the human world, what's the most important thing to do, and almost every one of them will say you cannot build ab muscles in the gym. You build the ab muscles in the kitchen. And I love that thought. One of the members of the Horses Advocate, which you should think about joining, because that's where a lot of really good thinking people come together to help improve the horse's life. She had added that to a comment on one of our Ask Me Anythings that we hold every month. And she said, you build them in the kitchen. I thought that was great, so I'm stealing it. Thank you very much. So nutrition is so important for building a quality horse to really make things happen in condition. But I talk about a top line because everyone sees it, and they see a top line that becomes poor, and it always starts at the withers, and then that goes away. So you start to see a high withered horse with no muscling around it. And then it moves back to the saddle area, and then back to the loin of the croup over the butt. And the horse is now 20, 25, 30 years old. And you see a keel going down, boat keel going down the back of the vertebrae sticking up, and there's no muscling on either side of it. And you wonder how that happened. Well, we can prevent that from happening. There's plenty of information on my website and on my podcasts about how muscle is lost. And it's not due to lack of conditioning. It's due to the absorption of proteins by our bodies that are being fed sugar constantly. Pardon me. So I want to take a moment to remind you that when you feed sugar in excess of the horse's needs, and sugar is in the form of starch, and the starch is in all grains and in all hays and pasture. When you feed starch in excess of their needs, or glucose, that's the same word. Starch is just a bunch of glucose put together. You're going to trigger insulin to sequester, to protect that glucose from damaging our body. Because when glucose is free running through our blood vessels, it's creating inflammation. Glucose is like the hall monitor in your old, elementary school, where if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you were given a pass, you were escorted. You couldn't go without an escort, and that's what insulin does. It escorts the glucose to where it's disposed of, and we want to dispose of glucose as fast as we can. We're either going to put it into the muscle cell, and there it's either going to be stored as glycogen, or it's going to be put into use in the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria to create energy. Any excess glucose is also brought to the liver and stored in glycogen there, because your brain needs glucose to operate. So does the horse. Then if there's any excess glucose beyond the storage capabilities of glycogen, either in the muscle or in the liver, and they're burning it as fast as they can, there's still going to be excess glucose. Then that's converted in the liver from glucose, the sugar, into free fatty acid, which is basically body fat. And that's put together on a glycerol to become a triglyceride. You have three fatty acids, and you have the glycerol, and these are put into a cell, a fat cell, and they just start cramming it in there. And that's what increases our body weight, our body fat. And in the meantime, the brain is screaming for more glucose, and the insulin's not going to give it to it. The horse or the person who's obese is actually starving at the cell level. So the cells are screaming for more food. So we end up eating more. Remember, the lollipop doesn't make you fat. Fat makes you want to eat more lollipops. If you keep that in mind, that's what's happening. And so the body accommodates the request by taking our protein and converting it into sugar. And that breakdown of amino acids into sugar is called gluconeogenesis. And over time, it will take away the structure of our suspensories, giving suspensory disease. It will take away the flexor tendon proteins, and we start to get the destruction of the deep digital flexor tendon, or DSLD, which is a fancy name for drop fetlocks. And you've seen this in horses where the hind fetlocks just drop to the ground, the pasture becomes parallel to the ground, and your horse may or may not be in excruciating pain. Then we have the loss of the top line, which causes the vertebrae spines to come together and start to rub. And those rub marks are what we call kissing spines. So we're starting to see a lot of that. We also see the defects in the hoof. So we see the hoof falling apart. We get cracks, we get sole abscesses, we get white line disease, we get flared out edges, we get crushed heels, the tubules don't remain in alignment with the pastern, and we have most of the demise of our hoof because we're not feeding enough protein that feeds the hoof, because the hoof is pure keratin, and keratin is a type of protein. So you want to continue to make sure that your horse is eating enough protein to have a good solid hoof. We also start to get a poor looking hair coat because all the hair is protein. So, and all you girls who are listening to this know about keratin in your hair. You get keratin treatments, or you get keratin shampoos. But the real truth is, if you want great hair, you need to be eating more protein with amino acids that make keratin. And that keratin will create a new head of hair that's going to be stronger, more healthy. We also worry about neurotransmitters, and with the the expansion of Cushing's disease in horses, which is basically a degeneration of the neurotransmitter dopamine. And the drug that is given to Cushing's horses is basically a dopamine replacement. You're trying to restore something that's broken by adding a neurotransmitter, which is basically a protein. So all these diseases I've told you about, the most obvious, I think, to everybody are three things. A top line that starts to look bad, starting to withers and moving backwards, and you start getting different saddles to fit because your top line has changed. You have a hair coat that looks not as healthy as it should. It doesn't have that vitality that you see, the gleaming spring coat, or the full, thick, glow in the moonlight winter hair coat that some of these horses should have. And the third is something that we call a hay belly, because the hay belly is basically loss of muscle in the abdominal area. And the weight of all those intestines inside the abdomen is pushing down and causing this belly to form. There may or may not be increased body fat, visceral fat, internal fat, that bad fat that we talk about in humans that creates that apple shape that leads to heart attacks in people. But that's the visceral fat. That's not body fat that's underneath your skin. That's fat that's surrounding your kidneys and other organs and actually infiltrating the liver. And in humans, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is an epidemic right now. It's affecting, last time I heard, 44% of all livers that are being donated for liver transplants are being rejected because of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's all because we eat too much sugar. So these are the biggest indicators: top line that goes bad, a haircut that looks bad, and a belly. If you see those three things happening on your horse is having chronic protein deficiency because it's being fed more sugar than it needs, and that is causing the breakdown of this protein. We also see this in humans that hit, late 60s and certainly in their 70s and 80s that have chronic protein deficiency as they consume more and more sugar. And in the human world, it's called sarcopenia, which just means a loss of muscle. And they start to become weak and frail. So we see the 80-year-old at the mall on canes and walkers, And if you push them, they'll fall down because they don't have the strength anymore. And stability on the feet is one of the hallmarks of failing in old age. And that's why we are now advocating in humans to build strength with balancing exercises so we can strengthen all those intricate muscles and the relationships of all the small muscles to make a sturdier body. But when we see this in horses, we don't notice it as much because they have 4 legs. They don't have 2 legs they're trying to balance on. They basically plod along. And over time, we just say, oh, well, the horse is, 18, 20, 22 years old. And we say, well, he's just old. And so he's looking old. He's already retired because he's broken down. And I think there are 2 ways to look at this. If you're looking at your horse as a investment where you've invested money and you've invested time, that investment you want to prolong as long as possible so it be in your best interest to feed your horse properly so you don't lose that investment at 15, 20 years of age, but you're still able to use that horse for that long period without losing money to lamenesses or to illnesses. In other words, the cost benefit ratio improves. So the money you invest in your horse is not being lost through veterinary care, through shoeing care that is unnecessary. A bad laminitis event that causes your horse to be so lame that you have to euthanize a horse, and that terminates that investment. I know that sounds so cold, but that's really what it is. And then we can flip over to the other half of you that are listening to this that are saying, but I love my horse. My horse is my soulmate. I want to care for my horse in the best way. And we sometimes fool ourselves into thinking that if we feed the horse with treats and supplements and grains, that we are in using air quotes here, doing the best for our horses. And what we're finding out now is that we're not doing the best for our horses. The horses are actually failing. And we have this excess money that we didn't have when we were in our teens and 20s, but late 30s, we have a job, the kids are off at school, hubby, sorry, I'm picking on a gender here, but most of the people who own horses now are women. If you're a man who's invested in horses just for the pure love of horse, that's great. It's me, but it doesn't matter. A lot of people start to look at nurturing the horse with these materials that tend to break down the horse over time, and yet we don't understand that we're doing that. In other words, we don't want our horses to get lean in the winter and start to lose all their body fat because we feel like we're not attending to our horse, when in reality, that seasonality of being fat in the summer and lean and thin in the winter is actually a healthy pulsing of the fat of the mitochondria. And that flexibility that we have in our fat cells, in our mitochondria, allows our horse to clean house, to get rid of the bad actors, and to not consume our proteins that cause all this demise. We can actually maintain our bodies and move forward our bodies. And talking about our horses here, but I don't think there's any difference, to tell you the truth. But it allows our horses to maintain their health and become a longevity project that stays in your barn. So if you actually do love your horse, they will live longer and happier and more content, a more willing partner when they're not constantly inflamed with these inflammatory ingredients. So that's the basis of what I want to talk about. The top line is the biggest culprit and that we see. And we also see the hooves. The farrier says, oh, well, we've got crushed heels, or we've got a flaring out wall, or we've got some cracks that are occurring at the quarter of the toe. And yet, as I go through life asking farriers if they know anything about protein, they all hunch their shoulders and say, no, we've been concentrating on how to shoe this properly. And some of the horse owners out there don't want to use shoes, but are forced into wearing shoes because of a condition that's occurring in their horse's hoof. And unfortunately, it takes years to get that way. And then it also takes years to correct it with feeding the horse with good protein. And again, go to podcast 27. If you don't know what a protein is, you should just go there and listen to that. I explain what a protein is. I have several other podcasts that talk about what protein I prefer and why I use it, why there's no harm in using it. I've been using it since 1973 when I started with horses. You can use any high quality protein you feel you want to use. If you want to get organic, if you want to get non-GMO, if you want to get any source of protein, if you want to go away from soybean meal and go to hemp or pea protein or whey protein, it's irrelevant. That's not what this podcast is about. We are now looking at what is happening to your horse in the terms of top line. So I'm going to punch this screen and I'm going to call up the white screen. And as I call up the white screen, I'm going to draw. Hopefully it doesn't shake too much. And hopefully, if you've got a chance, you should watch this. I'm also going to use my words to explain what I'm drawing. So if you don't get a chance to see it, you'll be able to, at least in your mind, paint the picture. So here we go. Whiteboard. This is so cool. I love technology. Okay, so I'm going to draw on this first whiteboard exactly what a T-bone steak is. And a lot of people just don't know that a T-bone steak, let's do this. A T-bone steak basically looks like a long bone and a short bone. And then on that bone, you have meat. And I'm going to draw that as, let's see, big round spot here. And then a little bit down here. So what you're looking at is I've got drawn an inverted T. I could have drawn it any way I wanted. I could have made a T, but on one side of the long part of the T is a thick red meat, which is called the sirloin. And on the other side, the shorter side, is a smaller bit more round. And that's actually your filet mignon. If you're into filet mignons, you want to do that. So where does that come in the horse's body? And that's what I'm going to draw for you next. I'm going to make a horse, and please, I'm not an artist. We all know this. So if I take a horse, there's its neck, and I'm bulging out, there's its fat belly, and then it goes to the tail. I'm going to draw the other side. So this is your horse. Yes, he looks a little fat, thin neck, fat, with a tail on the end. I'm going to take the green here, and I'm going to draw right down the middle. So, oh, I didn't explain this to you. I'm looking like I'm way up above, like using a drone looking down on the top of the horse. We're looking at a horse that is a top view. So all you see is the neck and the back and the tail. And I've just drawn a horizontal line going all the way along the neck, all the way along the vertebrae of the backbone to the tail. So that is the vertebrae. And what's interesting is a lot of people don't understand this, but off of the vertebrae are all these transverse processes. So I'm now drawing green lines off to the side, vertical, perpendicular to the horizontal vertebrae. So now I've got a top line view of the horse with a long backbone, and out the side are the transverse processes. You can look at your body as the vertebrae, and you can stick your arms out, straight out to each side. And those are the transverse processes. And on top of your shoulders is going to be the sirloin meat. And in your armpit is going to be the the filet mignon. So I'm going to draw that here. You've got all this muscling on either side. You have two rows of muscling that are along, parallel to the backbone. And these muscles help to stabilize the backbone It's like if you had a string of beads and the beads were just like on a string, and you hold the string with your fingers, one on each end, because that analogy will be basically your front legs and your rear legs. So now you've got the front legs and rear legs supporting this string of vertebrae that is supported by the muscle in between. So if you added muscle, it'd be like adding flexible glue, like rubber cement. So you could actually keep the string of beads in a horizontal plane if you held them with your two fingers, between your two fingers of each hand. But without that glue, it would just sag. And that's what's happening in our horses. So here I'm going to put front legs and back legs. Now I'm looking at the horse from side view. And I know it's really funky, but here's the horse's neck coming down. Let's see if I can do it. Here's the horse's neck coming down, and there's the tail, here's the neck, there's its belly, and there's the tail. All right, I know. If you're watching this, you're just laughing your tail off because you're saying, gosh, that's horrible looking, but that's okay. And then I wanted to make the backbone. The backbone comes down the neck, and it swings down there. It actually goes down, and then it comes up here and ends up in the tail. So that's your backbone. And then, of course, you have all your transverse processes coming across here. And you also have your spinous processes. Your spinous processes are on the top. And I know it looks like a dinosaur as you're looking at it here. It looks like some alien creature, actually. And then you have all your top line muscles here. And you also have this thin muscle on the bottom of the vertebrae. And the strength of these two muscles is what's going to add stability right here in the vertebrae. That's what it's going to do. And it's these top line muscles that have to be worked on and strengthened to get the spinous processes to move away from each other, because this is where the space between the spinous processes, where you get the kissing spine. And my theory is, and I would love to have somebody who does research, I would love them to look at this, to look at horses with good top lines and get a good top line scoring condition via ultrasound or top muscle measurements during ultrasound, and understand that the mass of the muscle is decreasing, which is causing these spines to come together. Because we don't get kissing spine in young horses, we only get it in older horses. And I believe it's because the top line is going away. I do want to remind all of you that if you've ever put a saddle on, I'm drawing a green line here, and this is your saddle. And these muscles that are on the top and the bottom of the vertebrae are so important for strength as you add weight to this. So in other words, if you're adding weight, which is gravity plus or minus your body, that's coming down, and it's going to cause this vertebrae to start sagging. It's also going to affect the muscles in your abdomen, and it's going to start to expand. So you have a top line getting weaker and the muscles, abdominal muscles, getting weaker, and all this ends up as a big belly, what we call a hay belly. So it's obvious if you go out to the barn and you look at your horse and you see that the top line isn't good, and it always starts right here. Right here. It always starts right here at the withers, and then it moves backwards. The loss of muscle starts up here, and I think that's because it is supported by the front legs. So it says, well, we're just going to use the front legs more, which may lead to more pressure on the front legs, which may lead to more front limb lameness. I'm not sure, but then it starts to move backwards and gets thinner and thinner and thinner. Let me see. I go back here. I want to explain something, one more thing. Oh, yeah. I'm back again looking at the T-bone steak and looking at the saddle. And I wanted to just draw um, the saddle. The saddle is sitting right about here. Y'all know I don't need to draw this. You all know that the saddle is basically sitting on top of the sirloin steak. And as the sirloin steak starts to leave, it's going to create more of a problem for your saddle. So what do we as humans do? I'm going to take away the saddle and I'm going to go to yellow. And this big yellow thing is we cover this area up in here. I'm laying a big layer of fat over the sirloin steak. I'm laying a big layer of fat right over the top line on the side view. And I'm laying it on the side view. I'm laying the big layer of fat right here. And we end up adding more food in the form of grain when we start to see top line go away. We start to add that to cover up the lost muscle. And it's very easy to do. Look at all the humans who have added fat to their back. Look at all the swine that we look at back fat because we want a certain degree of back fat for good pork, for good, bacon, for good, ribs or pork chops. They actually measure that with an ultrasound machine to find out what their top line back fat is, and they score it. And the horses need to have a good top line. In fact, this whole beginning of the top line score was brought to you by somebody who works in swine. Her husband had award-winning swine, and they would ultrasound the top and look at top line. And so this nutritionist started to look at the muscle and understand that they could grade them a grade A, B, C, or D in horses, with a grade A meaning they had a really good muscle covering from withers to rump. And then a B would be they lost their top line here in the withers. C is in the back, and D means it's gone in the very back. So the A, B, C, D, and I talk about this on the Horses Advocate website. We talk about the top line score and what it means. And you can look at a horse and immediately tell the top line score to a degree. But I want you to picture two people standing in front of you. I use Michael Phelps as one because almost everybody who saw the Olympics, gosh, how long ago was it? He was this amazing swimmer that has very low body fat, and he has this beautiful physique with lots of muscles that allows him to become the most winning Olympic swimmer ever. And then next to him, I want you to put another man. I call him Where's Waldo, that long, skinny, lanky guy out of the comics, or anybody that you want to consider being like not in shape, like no muscling. And what happens is these two characters are standing in front of you just wearing bathing suits. And one of them, you say, Michael Phelps, you keep your coat off because you look really good and you're inspiring me to work out and look like you. And then you look at the other one and you say, Where's Waldo? Can you put your coat on? We just want to cover you up. And that's what adding body fat does. It makes us look good. So if you look at Michael Phelps or Where's Waldo wearing some really good outfits, both of them look really good. Then you take your coat off and the shirt off, and you realize that one has a physique that's an athlete, which is what we all want. The other one has a physique of somebody who sits behind a desk playing computer games all their life, and they're barely able to move. And that's what's happening to our horses. We're covering it up with grains because grains add body fat because it's excess energy, excess sugar that they need. And that's all going to be converted over to body fat. The same is true for us, by the way. So hopefully these diagrams help you see what I'm doing. So I've spent about 35 minutes talking to you about how important it is for us to identify that a horse really does have chronic protein deficiency. I can spend all day telling you how important protein is, telling you what it is, telling you how to feed it, but a lot of us don't see it happening. And I know that maybe you see it, but the other people in your horse life don't see it, they don't understand, and yet they're telling you that they can't make the lunch date because the vet's coming out because your horse now has a suspensory ligament injury. And you want to help these people out. The purpose of this podcast is to help you talk to them, to say, let's just take a look at your horse. Let's look at the top line. Do you like it? Let's look at the hair coat. Do you like it? I was just looking at a brand new horse last week, and it was a husband and wife who owned it. The husband actually shows interest in the horses. And I said to him, so do you like what you're seeing here? He says, it doesn't look bad. I said, that's a double negative. Doesn't look bad. It's not really bad. And it was kind of, I was laughing, and I turned to the wife and I said, what do you think? She says, I think the horse looks like crap. Sorry if you don't like that word, but that was a quote. And I just started laughing because here are two people looking at the same horse. One said, oh, it's not bad. And he's the one who pays the bills. And the wife is saying, no, it looks horrible. What do I do? So I gave them the 2-week no grain challenge. And then I told them about adding soybean meal to add the protein that they need to get the hair coat. And I said, you're going to see the hair coat change in about 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to see the hay belly go away in about 2 months, maybe a month, 4 weeks. We'll say about 4 weeks. Most hay bellies start to disappear. It's just amazing to watch. And then in about 2 to 4 months, you start to see the new hoof grow out. And the farrier will say to you, assuming the farrier doesn't know what you're doing, a farrier will say, gosh, I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up. I've never seen the hooves look so good. If you have chronic sole abscesses, it may take 2 years of high quality protein being fed to your horse to really get in there. If your horse has Cushing's disease, you need to work with your veterinarian who's got your horse on Pergolide or Presend. And I, of course, never will tell you on any podcast to go against advice of your local veterinarian. It's unethical and it's dead wrong. So I don't believe in that. But I need you to have your veterinarian come on board. If you're a veterinarian, listen to this podcast and understand that all these things that I'm talking about are probably chronic protein deficiencies, and that you can probably work through them and get a lot of your horses healthier. You're not going to be out of a job, but your job is going to become, you're going to get a spring in your step. As you know, you're helping more and more horses and the people who own these horses through the hard times there is in maintaining them, keeping them going. We all know that dollars are getting rarer. I mean, a dollar just doesn't get as much anymore, and everybody's having to raise their prices to maintain their businesses. And what you can do as a veterinarian is help support these people through referring people to these things, to these podcasts, or coming to me and asking me, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about this. I really want to dig deep and understand this a little bit more. I'm way open to any veterinarian who wants to discuss these things and understand what Cushing's is and understand about chronic protein deficiency and how to feed a horse. Because the more of us out there getting the horses healthy, the more we're able to spend time on the emergencies that are bound to come in, the lacerations, the broken legs, hopefully we decrease the amount of colics we see. We definitely will have our reproduction to keep going, but it's going to be more fun. We're going to get more horses coming back in the fold because people can now afford their horse because the maintenance on them has become more focused on health, on a health span rather than just existence. And that's why it's in all of our favor to come out here and do the best we can for our horses. And that's what this podcast is all about. So I don't think I want to go much longer. My car is charged and I have to keep driving anyway. But just if this is all foreign to you, come join us at the Horses Advocate. Become a student. Take the nutrition course, which is part of the Horses Advocate, to understand what a protein is and what carbohydrates are and fats. Listen to all the podcasts, take notes, and then come ask questions at the Horses Advocate. That's where I spend my time addressing these things. And become an advocate yourself. And let's start changing the world So these horses that have served us so well for so many centuries, for thousands of years, they've carried us through battles and through migrations and through just farming and all the things that we don't even think about horses anymore. They're still here. They're still part of our lives, and they bring a lot of enjoyment and sport. Let's have them perform at their peak level by making sure that they have the muscles and connective tissue to do that. So that's Doc T. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I've got so much more to talk about, and I encourage you to write me, ask me questions, ask me what you'd like me to talk about a little bit more in depth. But I sometimes lost their words. The thrust of this podcast is to understand that chronic protein deficiency is staring you in the face. And the more you see it, and the more you know that it's there in your horse or your neighbor's horse or your friend's horses, and the more you get together as a group and say, okay, what is this chronic protein deficiency? Why has it occurred? Where are we going to go to change it? How do we change it? When is it going to change? How long does it take? You know, these are the questions. If you start asking yourself the basic question, how's what you're doing working for you? And it's not. You have to start working hard to understand it. And that's the whole purpose of the Horse's Advocate, is to break it down into simple things. And I hope this podcast has helped you in that journey that you're all discovering. So Doc T, I'm here somewhere in the United States, heading off to another farm to float some teeth. Sun is up and it's going to get a little warmer today, hopefully. So I hope your life is blessed. Again, I'm blessed for having you here, this technology available to get this out to you. I'm so grateful. We should all take a moment every day to be thankful for what we've got. That's what I do. That's what helps keep me going. I'm cascading rapidly toward 2023. I'm just going to make a brief announcement. In 2023, my plan is to have a big celebration all year long of me being with horses 50 years, me floating teeth for 40 years, me being a veterinarian for 39 years, and me living on this planet 70 years. And I hope to bring all the stuff that I've learned over to you so you can use it to make your horses thrive in a human world. Thanks for joining me. Doc T out. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There are two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.